and international circumstances are not the same. That's why it would be difficult to follow the same modalities. However, some lessons learned in Europe may be analyzed and, if needed and desirable, might be applied. But Korean people should be creative and innovative on this. And as I mentioned, at this stage, it's difficult to predict how and when the reunification will happen. However, one thing seems to be clear even at this stage, that we may assume that differences in economic and social development between the two Koreas will remain or even will be deepened. That's why, because the Republic of Korea has built an economy that ranks in the world's top 10 and democracy that acts as a goal for many countries around the world. At the same time, the anomaly of 21 million North Koreans living in poverty sticks out like the missing piece of a jigsaw in this dynamic region. Filling this missing piece of the jigsaw in Northeast Asia, I mean integrating the northern part of the peninsula into the global economy, will be in the interest of all members of the international community, but of course, first of all, of the Korean people themselves. Thus, when change does occur on the peninsula, the Republic of Korea is likely to find the international community looking to it for leadership in the process of rebuilding North Korea. But I'm sure that Korea can expect support and contribution to this process from the international community, including from the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your insightful suggestion. And Ambassador Tokola, is there anything you would like to add?
Maybe one point I'd like to get back to. Having heard my colleagues and reflecting on this morning's earlier panel session, makes me think it's important to emphasize the value of the unity of purpose of the international community. 5 of the 6 members of the 6 party talks and our very important global partners, such as the European Union, are in complete agreement that North Korea needs to abandon its nuclear ambitions. One can look at a policy and say it's bad to be inflexible and stubborn, or you can say it's good to be consistent and resolved. It sort of depends what words you choose. I think in this case, showing consistency and resolution to let North Korea know that it has no allies in its ambitions to achieve nuclear weapons will hasten the day that we can begin the 6 party talks to achieve that very important denuclearization. Once that happens, then many good things become possible. So I think resolve and unity is very important, and it will work.
Chancellor Lee, will you have anything?
It is very important to note that Ambassador Kozlowski just said before that the international community will support Korean reunification, and if there is any need, the international community is willing to do whatever is possible. Yes. As I mentioned before, it is very important for us to get the full support of our neighboring countries. It is very important. But the more important thing we should remind here is, to get the support from North Korea. We should try to persuade North Korea that reunification of Korean Peninsula would be much better than the present situation for them. It will not be very difficult for us to persuade North Korean people, but the problem is it is very difficult, or it is almost impossible for us to persuade the North Korean regime itself.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. I would like to add only one thing. Next year, the year 2012, will be a very special year for many countries. There will be presidential elections in the United States, in Russia, the change of power in China, and the beginning of the drastic changes, I think drastic changes in the Republic of Korea. And next year is also named by North Koreans as also the very special year. So from this point of view, I cannot deny, of course, the influence of these very important events on the foreign policy and concretely on the policy of all these countries towards the Korean Peninsula. But at the same time, I would like to express the hope that by joint efforts, at least Big Five, as you mentioned, the 5 participants of 6-party talks will be united and will make all necessary steps and efforts to continue this very important job, because we are not to waste time. The problem is too serious, and from this point of view, I think I can feel optimistic, because all of us were interested, fully agree with you, were interested in one thing: peace, security, stability, and no nuclear weapons in this part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, what Ambassador Vnukov just mentioned, my understanding is that no one on the Korean Peninsula and no one in the region and no one in the global world is interested in any kind of conflict, because it will be damages for all of us. That's why the main task is to find ways how to go ahead. And now, 2 fully private observations or thoughts, fully private. First, concerning a dialogue. All of us have mentioned the necessity for dialogue. This is not easy to kick off, to reach results. But I have some kind of association with the situation in Europe in 70s, when in 75 the final act of Helsinki Conference was signed between 2 blocs with completely different political economic systems that time, but the certain modalities were found how to ease the tension, how to improve, enhance cooperation. It worked. Maybe it will be in the, this principle or this modalities may be looked through the perspective for the Korean Peninsula, even for the Korean Peninsula. There are discussions to apply this experience for the whole region, but maybe let's start with the Korean Peninsula. Fully private suggestion. And the second fully private observation, especially Professor Lee this morning emphasized growing differences between North and South Koreans. Probably this is a fact, and it will make some problem. It will cause some problems and difficulties in the future, and you have to be aware of them. But I would not aggravate these differences. And as an examples, I may refer not only to Germany, but as well to the history of my own nation. The Polish nation in the 19th century was divided by 3 neighbors, and 3 parts of Polish nation used to live within 3 different states. But after that, we were able to reunify, and despite of these differences, we, within very short period of time, we re-established one nation and one state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I would like to open the session to the questions from floor. Due to time limits, we can accept 1 or 2 questions. Okay.
Yes, my name is Heikki Ranta. I'm from Finland, and I would like to ask a very practical question as a private and outside person. First of all, it has been said during this conference many times that China has a very big influence on North Korea. I have one question to the organizer, meaning is that has Chinese representative invited to this convention as well, I mean this discussion, or have they refused to join this discussion about North Korea, as they are so important party. And my comment additionally is that, especially to Mr. Lee Jun-gyu, that we should convince North Korea to the importance and the benefits of the unification. But during the last World Expo in Shanghai, I visited the North Korean pavilion and some North Korean restaurant in Shanghai. And I noticed in both places that their goal is also the unification, and they would like to convince South Korea about unification. So I feel that I think the question is more about the conditions than just that we both sides want to unify.
Okay. I think, Chancellor Lee, you are the right person to answer.
As I mentioned at the outset of my my presentation, the national reunification has been accepted for Korean people very natural, matter of course, for several decades. That is why the North Koreans you met in China, they also are saying all the time the national reunification. But the problem is the reunification of them and the reunification of ours are very much different. Their reunification is unification by the communists. Our unification is unification in a peaceful means under the system of a democratic and market system. That is the problem.
Thank you. Again, Chang Bum-cho from UNA Korea. I think U.S. representative made very valid point when he stressed the importance of sustaining seriousness of purpose of six-party talks exercise, where we understand that everybody involved are working very hard in this direction. But what would happen if we are all not successful in sustaining North Korean seriousness of the denuclearizing themselves? Will there be any alternative? And if so, what would it be? Some quarters in the United States, as well as in other the areas, people sometimes talk about the defining the success down. So far, our objective has been the total elimination of nuclear weapons program from North Korea. But given the urgency of addressing the threat, some people are talking about we perhaps lower down our objectives to contain North Korean nuclear activities to themselves, and we address first the issue of proliferation to other areas in the sensitive areas like the Middle East, Syria or others, Burma. I don't know what is real objectives of the U.S. governments when they deal with this North Korean. I think the Chinese, as a chair of the six-party talk process, they are more, in a sense, hurried manner to outsiders' perception in resuming the dialogue, even in the absence of the confirmation of seriousness of North Korea in giving up their nuclear weapons. Rather, they always emphasize stability, peace. So in that context, as U.S. Representative mentioned, the unity and resolve of international community is very important in terms of making North Korea give up all the nuclear weapons and their programs. So I would appreciate if U.S. representatives can respond to this question. Thank you.
Okay, will you care to speak?
No, I understand the question perfectly. Journalists and commentators are allowed to speculate about alternatives. Diplomats aren't. So, for us, the six-party talks is the mechanism. Of course, we've had internal deliberations within the State Department about trying to think about alternatives if they need be. But so far, we see nothing that we would present that would be a feasible alternative at this point. We're still optimistic. The six-party talks will resume, and they will be successful in their goals. We don't see another way to go about it. There is a second track, which we might have talked about more here, and that's the North-South dialogue, too. That's going on at parallel, or separately from the six-party. And the North-South dialogue can take different avenues. It can take different approaches. Different partners can be involved in that North-South dialogue. And we're quite insistent that the North-South dialogue, the quality of that meetings, improve as a condition for six-party talks. So maybe that's the area where you might see some more variety of approaches.
Okay, I think that is all the time we have. Oh, you have any question? Okay, one last question. Okay.
Sam Jameson with the Yomiuri Research Institute, formerly of the Los Angeles Times. On May 18th in Tokyo, Peter Beck, who is an academic, at a conference with Keio University professor, they are inaugurating a new study group, and he mentioned setting a cap on North Korean nuclear weapons, it is much as they already have nuclear weapons, and that the goal of the six-party talks would not be elimination of the North Korean nuclear weapons, but putting a cap on it, how many nuclear weapons they would be permitted to have. Is there any support for that? I never heard of such a statement until this particular incident, which is quite recent.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. My question is that I think diplomatic talks must be, you guys know best, give and take bargaining. Now, the North Korea government, I would assume, whatever you say, this is the beneficial to the North Korea as a whole, to benefit to the North Korea people. Nobody assumes that they always represent, in fact, most of the time they don't represent the people's interest. So when you do all these diplomatic, bargaining, you say all the nations should stay with the same conditions, same principle. What do